Good evening, everybody. How are you? My name is Patty Vansel, and I work at the events at RJ Julia's. I'm so happy you have joined us tonight. If you can hear me, can everyone give me a thumbs up? Okay, terrific. I'm gonna do, before I get to the authors, and I can't wait because we were just chatting 50 miles an hour before we came to you tonight. I wanna go over a few things, administrative Zoom things, just to make sure you know what's going on, a little housekeeping, so to speak. I want everyone to know that they are muted and that they will be muted throughout the event. I also want you to know that you can ask questions. The author is going to speak first, Jill, and in conversation with Elinor Lipman. If you have a question, instead of shouting it out since you'll be on mute, you can look down at your chat button and type away your question, and hopefully we will get to as many as we can. There is a little puppet behind me named Abby who's going to be taking your questions and then feeding them to the author or to Elinor. I also suggest up in the right-hand corner of your screen, you can either look at gallery view where you see everybody's faces, or you can look directly at the speaker and not sort of get distracted by everybody's face. The other thing I want to make sure that you do is think about buying this amazing book, which I read. The characters are fabulous. And Abby will make sure that in the chat box, there'll be a click and you can buy it from RJ Julia's. We'd appreciate that. We'd also gonna list some of Elinor Lipman's titles as well, and you can tap on those. And I think that's all our sort of business, and so I'm going to get right to introducing Jill McCorkle, who is an old buddy of mine. We raised our boys together, so when I saw her on the events list this month, I reached out to her and we caught up, and it just feels really good to reconnect with someone you've always really liked. And I am very proud to say that she has written an amazing new book called Hieroglyphics. I showed you. Jill's first two novels were released simultaneously when she was just out of college, and the New York Times called her a born novelist. Since then, she has published 5 novels and 4 collections of short stories. Her book, Life After Life, was a New York Times bestseller. She's a faculty at the Bennington College Writing Seminar. Again, her new title is Hieroglyphics. Here's a little teaser. I loved this. Everyone has a secret. Everyone has a memory that haunts or lingers. Everyone has a door they want to close, but for whatever reason, time continues to blow it ajar. I love that. I read an interview and Jill said, "My hope is that the readers of Hieroglyphics will be entertained, but also that they will think of fragments from their own lives and experience the oldest and purest form of time travel, memory." We are lucky to have Elinor Lipman with us tonight. She is going to be interviewing Jill. She is an amazing author in her own right, an award-winning author of 11 novels, including The View from Penthouse B and Good Riddance. And when we spoke before this Zoom meeting tonight, she was proud to say she's got a huge Facebook following. So
nope.
Be sure. Oh.
I didn't say that.
She didn't say that.
I wouldn't.
Somebody else said that.
Okay.
But she was also wanted me to mention, which I love, she was a finalist in the Nicholas Kristof Donald Trump Poetry Contest. So if anyone wants to ask her about that, I know I do. Hopefully she'll speak to that a little bit. Anyway, without further ado, let's get Elinor and Jill talking about this great book, and take it away, ladies.
Okay, well, I think I will start since I'm billed as the interviewer. I'm Elinor, and I thought, Jill, I would tell people that, you know, we're not new with this in terms of we're not meeting tonight, that we met, we think 29 years ago, because your younger child was just in utero, but you didn't tell anybody. But I met you because we were doing a conference at College of Charleston, writers something, and either you knocked on my door, we were just chatting after the events, and you asked me if I had anything to eat. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I had some biscuits, little British biscuits, and then it was only after like many months later that I found out why you were hungry all the time. So
Yes.
yes. But we've been friends ever since, and we were lucky enough to be just one summer, I think we overlapped at Bennington in person, and I was there and my son was 10. And your kids were little, and Rob, the baby, was kind of like flushing things down the toilet all the time.
Yes.
Like, I remember, not what it should be down there, but I remember little bit of consternation, and you had your mother there to help. So
yes, they changed the rules about the age of who could attend things after Rob had come through.
You made history. That's right. Well, anyway, I feel so connected to this book. Loved it. And part of it is set in Lowell, that Frank and his, no, wait. Yes, it was Frank and his mom who, he couldn't go back to Lowell. But I'm born and raised in Lowell. So I do have to know how you chose Lowell, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I have to thank Ellie publicly, because I directed all of my Lowell questions to her, and if she didn't know the answer, she directed me to this wonderful woman, Stephanie, who knows everything about Lowell. Part of it was interesting because I was so intrigued by these two historical events that had basically paralyzed communities, two communities I have loved and where I have lived. And so when I started reading about the train wreck that had happened in my native county in 1943, I realized a lot of the World War II soldiers who were on their way home were actually going to Massachusetts. And there were quite a few people who died in that train wreck who were going home to Lowell and neighboring towns. And so that put Lowell in my mind. And it just seemed the strange connection between these two accidents, because the Coconut Grove fire was, just a little over a year prior to that train wreck. So 1942, 1943, both in the winter, both events that just stopped so many lives, and both, pre-phone and easy ways of communication, and people really were left identifying those left by just simple, scars and dry cleaning tags and shoe size, and I was very taken by those.
And I don't want to leave those two tragedies too fast, because it is absolutely mesmerizing, and there some hints dropped quite early in the book, and then you enrich it. We hear the details, but you, in the acknowledgement, you say that it was something your father talked about a lot, and I wondered whether it was just that it was in his county, or did he know someone who helped, because strangers just showed up and helped and put people up, and was there some involvement?
Yes, he actually went, as many people did, to observe the aftermath. The derailed train just plowed like several football fields, out in the middle of nowhere, and you go there now and there's not a trace, of course. But he would have been 13 or 14. but he went to see the aftermath. But he was in school with someone who, as an Eagle Scout, ran telegrams back and forth as people were trying to find their loved ones. And I interviewed him.
And Horace was named after.
Horace.
In real life, was he named Horace?
Yes.
Oh, that's lovely. I was going to.
And he wrote me the most wonderful letter, which is a treasure, with all of his memories. And he's no longer with us, but what a gift that was. And then someone else in my parents' class in school, whose father basically owned the hospital in town, this one medical building that was the hospital. So I was very close to that story, and to the kind of my dad's stories about both the paralysis of a community, but also the way it just united the community. And certainly the Coconut Grove fire did that in Boston, and just completely reworked fire codes and the way burn victims are dealt with. So major changes.
And when you talk about, it was legendary. I grew up in Lowell, and it happened in Boston, and then I lived in Boston and Newton. And it was, when I was in 7th grade, a very nice boy who sat near me in class, we had to pick a book, and he, this morning or yesterday, I was saying to myself, I think that book was called Holocaust. No, that can't be right. And it was. And it was, and his name was Billy, and he was such a cute little boy in 7th grade. But I remember that it, things kept popping up. My mother's birthday was November 28th. It wasn't that date, but in the book it kept coming up November 28th. But it was so legendary in Boston, and everyone, my neighbors across the street in Newton, were supposed to go there, and they didn't. Something happened, something changed. They couldn't get a reservation, or their friends canceled or something. So it was just talking about legendary.
Well, that's the story you hear over and over. And in fact, today, it was so moving to me, and I heard from quite a few people, because on the front page of today's Boston Globe is the obituary of one of the survivors. He was one of 5, and now there are only 4. And he was a tap dancer. He was kind of in the chorus. And I just got chills this morning when I read his obituary, because a friend had sent me one. Leanne and Patty sent me an obituary maybe 3 years ago, and it ended saying she was supposed to be at the Coconut Grove, and at the last minute her plans changed. So there are so many of those stories. Both of these events speak to human error, but also this kind of strange twist of fate. There's the amazing story attached to the Coconut Grove fire. This young man, Clifford Johnson, who got separated from his date. He was visiting Boston, and he kept going back in, and he kept rescuing people, looking for her, did not know she had gotten out. And, he's the only human to have ever survived with that degree burn. And he went through years of rehab, and then he got married, went back to Missouri, his home, and a decade later died in a car crash in a fire.
Right. In the book, it is. Yeah. It is. And we'll get off this topic because there's so many wonderful characters. There's wit that we don't want you to think this is like tragedy 1 and tragedy 2. But I've read this book twice. I read it in Galley, and I read it again, and went and had a look up more about the Coconut Grove. And when you talk about it changed the laws, one of them that we all can relate to is you no longer can just have a revolving door, that exits have to have real doors on either side. And that's because of the Coconut Grove fire. Yeah. But anyway, so I have some, let me put my glasses on. I have many questions. I just, or they're really compliments that I'm like disguising as questions, but they're really compliments. But I just, for example, I just want to talk about, now, Shelley is one of the characters. There are different points of view. You have chosen to be third person Shelley, third person Frank, Frank, Harvey. Harvey. But you decided, tell us how you decided to go with a sort of epistolary, both sort of diary, journal, letters to the children by Lil. How you made that decision.
Yeah, you know, I just wanted her to feel present in the moment, always present in the moment. And when you're writing letters and journals, they have that effect of resurrecting the past. And she has spent her life collecting all these pieces, and basically she's editing her life. You know, she's deciding what she wants her children to know, and possibly what she doesn't want them to know. But I think she also, in the sorting and going through, is absorbed back into the various times. So they're not arranged chronologically, you know, it's more organic, the way you would remember something. She always writes on November 28th because she always pauses during the time to sort of count the minutes. So it first person just felt most natural with her.
Yes. Yes. I just want to, back to the compliments, there were just so many lines that I had to either underline or write down. And it's a way you have of so economically and subtly characterizing either a person or a whole relationship. And here is something she says, Shelley, who is the young woman who is mother of two boys. She's probably about 35 maybe in the book. Does that sound about right? She's a boy who's old enough to be in college. That's Jason. But Shelley is quoted very about Brent, the father of her younger one. Brent did not physically hurt her. He didn't even really threaten her. He just called it quits and left. So how lucky is that, she wonders. And I thought that when you think about that, it's subtle, but it says so much about her self-esteem and the world she grew up in, the family she grew up in. And that's, you know, one example. I won't make you comment on the compliments. Oh, and along the same lines, wait, I have to read this. This is on page 50, I think. This same people, and then I'll let you choose what I talk about. So Shelley, the same one, she had some dreams too. Like she said she wanted to go to college and study plants and trees, botany, he told her. In other words, he has to correct, it's a little bit of a correction, a little bit of an education, little bit of a put down. But the truth was she felt like she was at the beginning of her dream when he welcomed them in. So another just fabulous sentence I want to talk about. And unless you want to comment, I'll ask you a question. Okay. Okay. You know, I often quote, when I teach, I always use the book on becoming a novelist. And one of my favorite quotes is by John Gardner. And he advises people to make the reader an equal partner. What that means is the way some student writers do, as we know, hide, or like if you're smart enough, you'll figure out what I'm talking about. And what I thought that you do, I don't know how you'll comment on this because it's a compliment, but maybe you could expand on it, that you drop little hints and we get a sense of what Frank might do, or what Frank now, as maybe as a middle-aged man and a professor, had done. We get little hints, and they are hints and they get developed, but I never felt that you were withholding information from me. So if you could at all say, you know, how you feel about doing that drop hints, and maybe you could talk about CJ, the woman who was a victim who worked in the nursing home before we ever, maybe little hints, and how you parse those out.
Yeah, well, I think that always my first draft is heavy-handed. You know, I mean, I think that I do that thing where I make just really heavy, obvious marks, maybe overwrite, put more than I need. And then for me, I love revision. I mean, that for me is the real creative work. And it's all about going in and smudging those lines and seeing what you can remove without, you know, without feeling like you're tricking someone. And so, you know, with the way Lil alludes to Frank's having had an affair, she is subtle, and then, you know, every now and then she comes out with a 1-2 punch. But she's moving gingerly because she has her children in mind. So that too is part of having that audience of, you know, for the most part, she's speaking as if she's speaking to her children or her grandchildren. So how do you want to spin it? You know, how is history going to deal with this information?
I remember when we first met, and we were both maybe on our second or third books or something, and you told me that you like you had it all in your head, not all at once, but you would like work in the garden. And I remember that sort of tool shed turned into an office outside, remember? And I couldn't believe it, because I don't outline and I don't know, you know, I just put one foot in front of the other. And every once in a while, I think, if only I could do what Jill does. But do you still do that, where you work it out in your head first?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm sort of 2 steps ahead, thinking, you know, but ahead of what I'm writing. So, but this novel was like a novel in a million pieces, because so much of it was built on memory and fragments of memory. And so I had great fun for several years collecting all those pieces and not quite sure how they fit together. Like, I didn't even know for a long time how Shelley and Harvey, her little boy, how Shelley and Harvey were going to connect with Lil and Frank, you know. And then I'm like, oh, they live where he once lived. And as soon as I located the geography of the house and realized that as a boy, Frank had played in this yard, and now as a boy, Harvey's playing in this yard. And I started thinking of it more as you would an archaeological dig. So, you know, on this site, Frank lived down here, Harvey's living on top of him. And Harvey's finding, you know, some of the little treasures that Frank had left along the way. So as soon as I knew how they connected, you know, it felt like that. I'm not myself a big camper, but I know there are those kinds of tents where you have that one pole that goes, whoo, you know, and the whole thing comes up if you have arranged it correctly on the ground. And when I realized that little point in geography, that became that pole, you know, and immediately all these other parts had a timeline.
Yeah, and I just want to say to the audience that I know that there are questions, and we are getting to those at 7:30 or 7:25 or 7:35. So we know you're there, so we're not ignoring you until then. Then we'll ask you the questions. So okay, let's see, John Gardner. Let's see. And I loved hearing, Shelley, I find, has a fascinating job. Not necessarily the job itself could be tedious. We know her mind wanders in a, sort of creative way. But she's a court stenographer, And you must have probably interviewed a court stenographer, unless it was just interview. But then you had her deeply involved emotionally with the case that was before her in court. And I found all of that fascinating. I loved hearing about that.
Well, and that trial, you know, was written pre-Harvey Weinstein. You know, so it was one of those, I'm like, oh, you know, the book was already, and then the whole Me Too, but it's that kind of case. And for people who had read Life After Life, which was my last novel, there is a murder that I left unsolved at the end of that book, because I thought that was the realistic choice, because there are far too many people living on the edge of this society who do disappear, and people don't seek justice. And I saw that young woman as being one of those. And so it happened. People accuse me of doing it to her, but no, it logically happened. And but I heard from so many people that I decided, okay, well, justice will be served. And so that's the trial Shelley's working on. So that's in the background. So if you read Life After Life, you'll recognize a couple of people sitting in the courtroom. Yes. And that was a lot of fun to do. And Harvey's teacher is actually the son of Stanley. Ned. Yes. So Ned was in Life After Life, teeny tiny part. So
well, with Ned, I'm tempted the way people have asked me. You know, they'll ask. I remember the very first question. My first book was my first novel was Then She Found Me. And I remember someone raised their hand at a reading and said, "How's April?" And I said, "Oh, she's great. She's pregnant." You know, I made up what happened. And, you know, I was very dear friends with Anita Shreve. And when someone would ask Anita that question, like, well, then what happened? She'd say, no, it's a novel. It ended. That was the last, nothing. And I always say, oh, well, you know, but I found myself in this position. It's like, I hope things work out with Ned and Shelley.
I kind of do too. You know, if there's anybody I'm going to circle back and check on in a few years, I think it's Shelley and Harvey.
Oh, good. And would you like to read a little bit? Because
sure.
We might be just
yes.
So hypothetically.
I will do it quickly. And just for ease, since we were talking about Lil, I'm just going to read a little bit of her opening, describing
questions.
What she's putting together.
Okay.
We all are haunted by something we did or didn't do, and the passing years either add to the weight or diminish it. Mine have diminished, perhaps because I've spent time thinking about it all. It might sound silly, but I see these bits and pieces as my contribution to evolution, the unearthing and dusting of the prints and markers that led me here. Some seem to bulldoze right through life and up to their headstones, but I want to take my time. I want to find the right words. I imagine my recipient to be you two, or perhaps your children, and I hope this is so, rather than some stranger who comes in and hoists old boxes into a dumpster or rakes away the remainders of my life like the sad debris in the aftermath of a flood or fire. I'll never get over the sight of what we left behind at our home of over 50 years to move down here, a mountain of cast-off things, old towels and linens, papers and books and shoes and pots, side tables and lamps, hoses and hose, packets of seeds I meant to plant, and a rubber squeak toy that had been safely hidden away in the back of my closet by one of the dogs long dead, and so much more. Things not needed, things long forgotten, cans of cream of whatever soup and V8 juice. Why? And peas that had sat there forgotten for years, and things that never should have been there in the first place, like tuna helper, or those things in my closet, like that geometric print mini dress I bought in the 60s, hoping to look like Petula Clark or Judy Carn, a perky pixie kind of dress that I never had the nerve to wear, and instead looked at it there at the back of the closet for years, along with a wiglet and a long frosted fall and some jackets with shoulders resembling a football player or Victorian monarch. We divided it all into Goodwill, consignment, recycle, or landfill. But there were also the things I couldn't let go of: letters, reminders, souvenirs, and I'm taking my time, relieved when I find something that might have gotten lost in that mountain of debris, like one of your drawings from first grade, or the stub from a movie I'd forgotten I even saw, or a note from my father. When the moving van pulled away that afternoon and we got in the car and turned southward, the space within the car seemed so empty, vacant, our suitcases and silver chest in the trunk, an overnight bag and thermos of coffee on the back seat. And I had that terrible feeling that I had forgotten something, because I was thinking of all the times the car was filled with you two, your belongings, your music and voices, the dogs, while going to school or on vacation or just to the grocery store, where I bought all of those things that I then put on the shelf there in our dimly lit pantry on the red gingham contact paper I spent one snowy afternoon 40 years ago cutting and sticking in place, all those things that I placed there and then forgot about. It's mysterious how fluid time has become for me. I wake and pour a glass and have no idea what I'll find. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we can take questions. Someone has asked.
My publicist said to do this. So
Okay. Okay. I might do, let's see, I might do the gallery, because somebody asked about if summer reading, we'll get to that, or just reading books we recommend, but also someone asked about process, and I wonder if the person who, like, if you feel that we already answered that, if the person who asked that, maybe we could unmute that person who asked about, each of us talking about our process. Maybe anybody we could talk a little bit more. I think we said Jill puts it in her head first, and then it's many process, and she overwrites, and then revises, loves to revise. And I don't have an outline, so I start with a first line and maybe a paragraph and a character and maybe the character's job and maybe, if I'm lucky, the city where they live. And then I just, it's like, follow the headlights on the foggy road to find out where I'm going next. And yes, so, let's see, I'm going to check on other questions, and one of them is about reading. Okay, question. Tell us about your recommended summer reads, writing processes. Okay, they might be shy. Okay, we don't have to do that. So Jill, first of all, I understand, and you just mentioned it for 1 second, apparently pick of the week in People magazine today.
I'm not pick of the week, but I'm in there.
No. Picks of the week. Picks.
Oh, pick of the week.
I did say pick of the week, but I meant each one of those is pick of the week.
But that's okay. I'm in wonderful company. Yes.
Oh, great. So anyway, what I'm reading right now, I am reading Musical Chairs by Amy Popple. Did I spell her name right? I mean, did I pronounce it right? And it's, I'm about halfway through, and I highly recommend it. And I've also loved Atomic Love by Jenny Fields. And wait, hold on. And then I want to say some upcoming books that aren't yet. Highly recommended. The Wright Sister, and Wright is spelled like the Wright brothers, because this is one of the Wright, by Patty Dan. And it's an epistolary novel where the sister Catherine Wright has been, Wilbur has died, and Orville doesn't want to talk to her anymore because she got married. And I guess he's like, can't deal with it and is jealous. And also upcoming, and then it's Jill's gets the floor. Dear, wonderful friend of both of ours, Mamie Medwed, has a new book coming out in January. It's called Minus Me, and it's vintage Medwed, funny, smart, just poignant, charming, wonderful. Minus Me by Mamie Medwid. Okay,
And
Jill.
I cannot wait to read Mamie's new book, which I'm eager to get. And I am very excited to read Natasha Trethewey's Memorial Drive, which is in that People review today.
Oh.
So I'm very excited about that. And I've been reading a lot of stories because when I'm working on a novel, it's easier for me to read stories. And two recent collections that I really love, Randall Keenan's If I Had Two Wings, I think it comes out in about a week, and Daniel Mason's Registry of My Passage on Earth. I have read wonderful stories in a collection, No Diving Allowed, Louise Marburg, which is not out yet, but coming soon. And what else did I have? I think that about covers. I mean, I have a big stack by my bed, but I always blank when I hear this question.
Oh yeah, I know. I have to write them down. Someone asked also, it was the second part about any differences in the writing process during isolation, during the pandemic. So this must have been all finished. Of course.
Yeah. I mean, I was supposed to be there in person, so there is that sad part about not actually being.
You are there in person.
Well, I know. I know. I know. And actually these events are feeling much more intimate and kind of wonderful than I imagine. And I do get off and I feel like I've been somewhere, but I also keep having this funny feeling that everybody else is really there and I'm not. It's like that dream where you just can't get there. Like I keep thinking Patty's at the bookstore, and
oh yeah, I know.
But here we are. So it has not changed my writing life. I mean, I think for a lot of people, the kind of hunker down mode, it is kind of wonderful writing time. I think the distractions obviously come from, the worry and fear of what's going on. So some days I get up really, really early anyway, and some days I try to have that quiet time, that writing time when I'm just thinking or dabbling before I read the news.
Yeah, my general writing habit was I write in the morning and I aim for 500 words a day. But when I live in New York City, but I've been up 61 miles north, luckily on a lake. And so I was writing 7 days a week and much more productive and, finished a book, which is, doesn't have a title yet. So I can't plug it. But it does have Donald Trump in it. So anyway, and another Jill fact. Let me see. Did I get every question? I'm going to look at here. Look at hieroglyphics. Oh yes, excellent question. I meant to ask this. Someone asked, I love the title of your book, Hieroglyphics. What made you choose this title? I know it's from the Carl Sandburg epigraph, but there had to be more, like why that hit you is just right.
Yes, and actually I had the word in my mind and started looking up, in literature, among poets and all, where it appeared, and it does not appear that often. It's just a wonderful word, and of course, sacred text. And I was thinking so much about all that we leave behind, and we leave notes and little bits of ourselves that may be indecipherable to those left with it, without explanation. So in that regard, parts of our lives are like some ancient language. And so I just became interested in all the different languages. Shelley's doing shorthand. Her son Harvey's trying to write in Klingon. Frank, as a boy, all he wanted was a Captain Midnight decoder badge. And so I was also thinking not just of language and words, like Lil and her dad in the aftermath of the Coconut Grove fire, because, you know, basically her mom says, see you, you know, kind of, I'll be back. And she goes off and she doesn't even say where she's going. So they're left with this void and the unknown. And so they form the habit of saying to each other, be right back, you know, and making it right. They really are right back. And they even abbreviate it, BRB. Yeah. And Lil says, who you would have spent the rest of your life thinking BRB as a person, it means be right back. And so I was thinking of symbols in our lives that carry messages. And about a dozen years ago, I had the good luck of being asked to teach a writing class in Florence. I always say Italy, not South Carolina, though I've been to Florence, South Carolina too. Anyway, but in Italy, I fell in love with the Foundling Hospital, you know, and I don't know if it was just one of those emotional experiences that kind of changed, it just changed something in me, you know, and to be in the presence of this 600-year-old building and this wheel where babies had been put and wheeled into this building with all these little tokens sewn into their clothes, you know, lockets and keys and hairpins, just little memorabilia that you see there in these, you know, just hundreds of them. And they all say the same thing. They all say, I'll be back, you know, and it's a promise that likely was never kept in, you know, more cases than we want to think about. And so I was thinking a lot about I'll be back. And also all the ways we say, I'm here, you know, Kilroy was here, and we write the bathroom wall. I mean, I had a lot of fun with graffiti. You know, but even something as simple as a kid's hopscotch board in the middle of the street, which you don't see that often anymore, but I did the other day because kids are stuck at home in the pandemic and grandmothers are coming and teaching them to play hopscotch, you know. So, you know, otherwise, who would know what this funny snail on the sidewalk, you know, with the squares. So it was just all about words and symbols. So if I tried to tell somebody, what's your novel about? Well, it's about words and symbols. It doesn't send you rushing, you know, to the shelf, but that's the root, that's the germ of that title. I've always been fascinated by sort of the, you know, the pyramids and what was housed within.
There's another question, and very close to the title, which is, what is the story behind the cover? Was this the very first design, or were there others? I love this question because you probably have cover approval or cover consultation, as my contract always says. I'm in the lower tier of cover. Yes. Cover help.
Well, you know, and they did, I did get to see covers, and when I saw this one, I just knew it was it, because I think that no one could imagine what actual symbols should be there, you know, because there's so many contemporary symbols within, and so when I saw that it was the word itself and the word broken, you know, broken into parts, I just loved it. I mean, to me, it said exactly what.
Yes, there it is again. Yes.
It said to me exactly what it is.
Yeah. And, goes back in time, but you made publishing history. And I didn't know you at the time, but I opened up the New York Times book review, and there were two novels being published the same day. And they were by you. It was the 7th of July the 7th. No, 7th, July
Yes.
the 7th.
Mhm.
And I should know the other one.
The cheerleader.
The cheerleader. And I think this could have been the first time. And you might, if you have a minute to just talk, was it Louis Rubin? Was that his name?
Yes.
And that your relationship, and he was he founded Algonquin, and he had been your teacher in graduate school?
Yes, he founded Algonquin. He had actually been my teacher when I was an undergrad, and he just continued to read my work after I graduated. And he was just a wonderful man. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean, I was somebody who was not doing very well in school in a lot of my courses, but I knew that I was going to graduate with honors in creative writing, so it's in the good old days when you could get honors in an area without having a certain grade point average, or I would have been out of luck, So, I basically had just put all my time there, and I remember going to his office kind of terrified, and I said, if I graduate, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And he said, well, you're going to go to graduate school. I said, what? And he said, yeah, you're going to go to graduate school and one of these writing programs. And I know where you need to apply. And he just told me everything to do. And he had also founded the Hollins graduate writing program. And so I'm sure there were some phone calls, because within a week I was going to Hollins, and I had told him, I said, well, I don't think I can afford to go to grad school. I'm gonna have to wait. And he said, well, how much can you afford? And the deal they offered me was everything but what I had said I could afford. And I had a job in the library there. He really was, the fairy godfather.
And something else, and then there's a few more questions, and we do have time. I remember you telling me, because people say, well, I think I have a book in me, but I don't have the time. And I would tell them that you were working as, I think, secretary, or fancier title, in the medical school, right? And you used to get up and write from 5 to, is that right? 5 or 5:30 to when you had to be at work. So that's always been, that is, I think, role model for people who say, I don't have time.
Yes. And then at work, I had certain files that had real gross names, medical gross names, but really it was my third novel.
Oh, there you go.
So a big chunk of that novel was written. I learned there was no reward for being fast at my job. They just gave me more work, so I would just pace it out.
Right. Now, someone said, say your book is getting adapted to a movie, fingers crossed. Who are you casting in the lead roles?
Oh, that's great. Well, I can see many. This is like the pipe dream question, right? Can I say Christopher Plummer and Helen Mirren?
Sure.
Could I say Robert Redford and Jane Fonda?
Sure. You can say anything.
I think Shelley is kind of a young, maybe, a younger, but a Toni Collette type of character.
Oh, okay. I think Hollywood would, make her, like, doll her up a little, like an Emma Stone, maybe.
Yeah, well, I could see Emma Stone.
Yeah.
That's good. We'll go with Emma Stone.
Okay. And we have here, this is a comment from Brenda. Yes, I was Professor Rubin's student too in UNC in the 1980s. He was tremendous, all uppercase. So glad Jill is sharing about him, the oldest and purest form of time travel memoir. That's so so very Louis D. Rubin.
I just got goose flesh with that. Thank you for that. Yeah, I feel like he's, you know, I can't talk about this career I have been lucky enough to have without him.
And it's very rare. You have been with Algonquin for every book.
Every book. I worked with Shannon Ravenel. Lewis put me with Shannon, though Lewis always read everything too and had his comments, right up until right before he died.
Yeah.
We were still having these conversations. And it just always meant the world to me. And I try to do the what would Lewis say, you know. But I worked with Shannon Ravenel, who's just a phenomenal editor with every book, and then she retired. And so this is the first time I have worked with the amazing Kathy Pori. But we've just had, I mean, she's phenomenal, very much in the Louis D. Rubin school of editing.
I have two Algonquin books, and I think it's Abby who's writing these down in the comments, that are next on my list. And one of them is the new Caroline Levitt book, which is called, it's called With or Without Me. Is that right?
Yes. And Larry Watson. There's a Larry Watson book.
Oh, I don't have, but I was also sent the Jill it's upstairs. It's another Algonquin book, and it's by the woman who does the Great American Short Stories when she was at home.
Oh, yes, Heidi Pittler.
Heidi Pittler.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
I'm doing an event with her later on. Yes.
Oh, really? Oh, yes. You're very nice. Michael from Algonquin sent it to me.
Yes.
And, you know, just a little
fabulous
favor. Yeah. So how are we doing? Any more questions?
We're actually doing well on time, I think, because I'm worried about the two of us being together.
I'll give you too much. Yeah.
It's just so fun.
Reminiscing. Yeah. And, when my book, The View from Penthouse B, came out, Houghton Mifflin brought it out at the exact same time as my essays, which was called I Can't Complain. And I always credited you for that. I thought it's because Jill had two books that were published at the same day, and that it gave Houghton Mifflin courage.
Yeah, I love those essays. Love those essays.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, ladies, I think we're there are no more questions coming in. I love the interaction between you two. That was sort of the whole highlight of the evening. Obviously, you are incredibly connected and both really talented. Jill, you know, I wish you the best of luck in all of this.
Thank you, Patty.
And
we will catch up soon.
We will catch up, but congratulations. Elinor, you are a pleasure. I can't wait to read your books as well. And I want to remind all our audience members, please pick up a copy of this book. You're not.
Wait, excuse me. I have to show you. Okay, hold on. I was just going to say that I hate to do this. It's so obnoxious, but I was just going to say it's now out in paperback since the pandemic. Pandemic.
Thank you so much to our audience. And
thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank
you.
Thank you for coming out tonight.
Exactly.
Right. Hi, Jilly.
Bye-bye.
Yes, lovely. Good night.
Good night.
I may stay here.
Can you see?
Okay, there's still people.
Oh, we just caught me for a second. So I guess I'll go and eat.
I'm going to go too.
Okay.
But,
okay, guys.
Nice to meet you, Elinor.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, I was at RJ Julia on Turpentine Lane. I did an event there.
Well, someday come back. It is the best place, and I'm going to have you guys to my house in Madison. And
I can't wait.
Drink wine and have a great time.
Okay.
Someday.
That sounds
That's
wonderful.
the new
That
word.
sounds wonderful.
Good luck.
Thank you
Bye.
so much for
Bye.
this. Bye.